late. I figured I'd record some videos. I don't know when I'm gonna get a chance to upload them. But, yeah, I was watching a narcissism video before about how people, once they start studying narcissistic personality disorder and the signs of it, they seem to see it everywhere. And a lot of people question their judgment, like, oh, is there really this many narcissists? Am I just seeing it everywhere? Am I crazy? Or am I the problem? And 9 times out of 10, I think the person is right. Like, I think, you go online and they have like the formal statistic about narcissistic personality disorder, and they tell you it's like 1% of the population or 1.5%, and I think that's bullshit. Um, there's a couple of reasons for this. One, narcs aren't likely to go to therapy because, they're not the problem. And two, even if they do end up in therapy, they're very good, I think, at manipulating the therapist into believing that they're not the problem. And the third thing is like, when people talk about narcissism or toxic people, they're not just talking about the technical DSM definition of narcissism. It actually encompasses the entire cluster B family: borderline personality disorder, histrionic, and even some antisocial, sociopathic behavior. So when someone says like, oh, narcissist, they might actually be describing someone who's more of a borderline or a sociopath or one of those other related conditions. So if a therapist were to assess the person based on the criteria for NPD and only NPD, the person might get missed because they might not technically meet the narcissistic personality disorder criteria, but they can also have a lot of borderline traits as well, and then the therapist isn't specifically looking for that, so they just write it off like, oh yeah, they're not a narcissist. So I think that's kind of why that happens and why the statistic is BS. Um, and no, not everybody's a narcissist, but I do remember reading at some point that the true statistic is more like 1 in 6 or 1 in 7 people, which is about 15% of the population. And I think that's actually about right. Like, looking back in my life and the people that I've met, and like, I think that's actually the true statistic when you consider narcissists, borderlines, histrionics, or people that are just toxic in general. I think that's more the true number. And I think what happens is when you start researching this kind of thing and you become aware of it and aware of all the different behavioral patterns and all the different tactics they use, you can spot it very easily. And the only time I would say like someone's seeing it everywhere is like they see one trait or one thing a person says and they have a knee-jerk reaction like, oh, narcissist. Like maybe that's a bit of an overreaction, but if you're familiar with cluster Bs from people in your own life and from doing your own research, and you start to observe in a person patterns of behavior, like over a period of time that are consistent with narcissism or cluster B behavior, then your assessment is probably right. Um, and the only times actually since studying this kind of thing that I've been wrong is when I've questioned myself and given somebody the benefit of the doubt, and then down the road it's always determined like, oh yeah, they were they were a narc or they were a borderline or whatever. So I guess it's just like a word of advice to people to trust your judgment. If you're familiar with narcissism and you've seen it a lot in your own life, and you're kind of going based off of a few consistent behaviors you've seen in an individual, not just one or two things they said or did, but if you're starting to see traits unfold over time, you trust your judgment because it's probably correct. And just like people that feel that they're seeing toxic people everywhere, well, yeah, it's like, I hate to say it, but they are everywhere. It's not everybody, but it's a large enough percentage that you're gonna see it a lot. And people have said too in these communities, like, once you see it, you can't unsee it. You know what I mean? Like once you meet somebody and they tick enough boxes over a long enough period of time, like your radar is gonna go off and you're not gonna be able to ignore it anymore. Like it's gonna that's just gonna be it. So yeah, it's like once you see it, it's like you can't unsee it, and eventually, if a person's a narc, you're gonna you're gonna catch on to it. So I guess that's just kind of what I've observed with myself and the narcs I've come across, and also just sort of telling people to not question their judgment so much if they feel like they're meeting a lot of narcs. And I know that's hard to do since a lot of us have been gaslighted so much, but that's one thing I learned too, that you have to undo some of that gaslighting programming and start trusting your own inner voice more, because not doing that and dismissing your own inner voice could sometimes be dangerous. So yeah, just a word of advice, I guess, and I'll see you on the next video.